Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of our Digital Dialogue series. This afternoon, I'm joined by super yacht lawyer and partner at Hannaford Turner, Adam Ramlugon. Hi, Adam. How's it going?
Hi, Will. Good, thank you. Great to be with you.
Yes, well, thanks for joining us. I think we agreed that we should point out at this stage, just for the audience and for your sense of pride, that the moustache is there for a reason.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. I'm actually participating in November, this November, in honour of a dear friend of mine that sadly took his own life earlier this year. My friends and I are looking to raise awareness for mental health issues and suicide prevention and raise some money for those causes. So this isn't an active style choice. Please do bear that in mind.
Well, it does sound like a very worthy cause, and we'll be sure to share that link with everybody. And we forgive you the look. So anyway, Adam, we've been we've met up many times over the Reading Between the Wines series, which has been a thoroughly enjoyable way of appraising the market over a few glasses of red. Obviously, a bit early in the day for that today, but I guess we share a common view on a lot of elements of this industry, and it's a real pleasure for me because we actually have had a similar amount of time within the industry, a similar trajectory because of our similar ages. So it's really interesting from my point as an interviewer to be able to talk to someone of a similar age who has seen the industry evolve in a similar way. I think lawyers tend to be identified as some of the best barometers in our market. It's very often thought that lawyers know it's happening before it's happened. And in this strangest of years, I'd just be interested to hear your opinions on what it's been like on the front line, as it were. What's the reality of what's happening with orders, with transactions, with litigation? What are your thoughts?
Sure. Well, I mean, the first thing to say, of course, is this year's been completely unprecedented for all of us in the super yacht industry. You know, the history of global pandemics goes way is so much older, of course, than the super yacht industry. We've got no precedent for this, and I think it's fair to say that, obviously, speaking from the UK perspective, we went into our first lockdown in March, didn't we? And the first couple of weeks after that lockdown were quite strange. I think not just the super yacht industry, but the UK economy was just in a bit of a state of shock. No one really knew what was coming or going. From our perspective, those first two weeks, in terms of our practice at Hannaford Turner, in terms of our yachting practice, we saw a lot of, if you like, runoff or consequential issues that arose out of COVID and out of lockdown, principally in the charter market. A lot of charter disputes, people looking very carefully at the wording of their charter contracts. I think we did discuss this at the time, Will. One of the key solutions that was often offered by yacht owners that had their yachts for charter is simply to just rebook the charter with the charter client for 2021, and everyone walked away. That wasn't always always possible, and we did handle a few little charter disputes on behalf of both owners and charterers at that time. Another thing that we were looking at was putting what we termed a COVID addendum on the back of charter contracts to deal with the consequences of, for example, a guest contracting the virus either before they're scheduled to embark on charter or there being an outbreak during the charter period. Neither of those situations, of course, is contemplated by the MIBA charter form, and that's entirely understandable, given it was drafted, at the time when these sorts of events weren't in the forefront of everyone's mind. But after that initial shock, if you like, and those first few weeks, we fortunately at HT found that business really did effectively become as normal really quite quickly, in terms of clients were keen to proceed with, I mean, builds or sale and purchase, or we had some on-running disputes work that just carried on unabated. We carry on quite a broad and diverse mix of work around the asset class at HT. So, as I say, we feel quite fortunate, perhaps, and didn't really see much of a drop off in our activity. I hear from other friends in the industry, in the charter market, that really did struggle, particularly with the effects of lockdown and the risks of another one coming, as they were perceived at the time. Of course, we've just gone into a second lockdown here in the UK, and I think it's the same position in France, isn't it? So other sectors of the industry might have suffered perhaps more than the lawyers have, which won't be music to everyone's ears.
So, I was about to say, in terms of having obviously had to deal with those situations, where would you say, as we enter the towards the end of this year, where would you say client confidence is in the market? And I'm talking about in terms of the potential for new orders, new sale and purchase transactions.
Yeah, well, I think that a very insightful comment on that topic was made by one of my partners, Matt Hannaford, earlier this year, where he said that, unlike, let's say, the commercial shipping market, for example, which does follow cycles, that the super yacht market is more acyclical, in that it doesn't necessarily follow that a historic recession is going to be the death knell for the market. The class of ultra high net worth individuals that make up the buyers, the sellers, and those that commission new build projects are generally sufficiently insulated from market shocks, economic shocks, so as to mean that if they have got their heart set on commissioning a new project with Lurston, for example, they're still going to go ahead and do that. And that's certainly been our experience. But then, just thinking back to the US election of a couple of weeks ago, I have heard stories of lawyer colleagues of mine that practice out in the US, who have clients that were effectively waiting to see what the outcome of the US election was going to be before penning new build contracts, and that their stance was, if Trump was re-elected, they were just going to pen them. If Biden got in, then they'd see what the economic lie of the land looked like, if you like, over in the States before doing so. So it would be wrong to say that economic forces, if you like, don't have any bearing on the market, but I certainly don't think they have an equivalent level of impact, if you like, compared to harder markets that aren't so that aren't acyclical.
Can you be drawn on an opinion of what the US election results or lack of results might mean for the 50-odd% of clients that country supplies the industry?
Well, I can only base, I suppose, my opinion on that particular one example I've got, which is that it may give some US market participants pause for thought. It has, according to that story, there's two potential projects there that will presumably be put on ice whilst those potential buyers look to see how the Biden administration beds in. So on that analysis, it's going to have something of a negative or depressing impact on the US market, perhaps maybe just in the very short term, and market confidence will return once the market becomes a little bit more aware of what Biden's policies are going to look like. But for us, again, I don't think that the outcome particularly affects the UK and Europe and the builders of Northern Europe.
Well, okay, let's turn something that definitely does affect the UK and Europe.
It's not the B word, is it?
It is. We're sort of almost at that time, and you've obviously written very articulately on this subject a number of times across our portfolio. And so I think you're very well placed to comment, or as well placed as anyone is in this completely sort of unknown arena in which we sit at the moment. But obviously we've lurched from one catastrophe, which is a very real catastrophe in the coronavirus, to another potential catastrophe which is entirely man-made and of our own doing. But it creates I guess a multitude of conundrums for our industry. What are your thoughts as January approaches?
I mean, there was an article, I think that was circulated, it was published in the Times, sorry, I should say, 2 or 3 weeks ago, that was looking to argue that the UK leaving the customs zone, the single market, was acting as a pressure point for UK resident yacht owners to re-import their yachts into the UK, back into the UK from Europe, under some sort of extended amnesty regime, or they'd be faced with the prospect of effectively paying import VAT twice. But it seemed to me that article, it may have been factually correct in what it was inferring, but I don't think it really applies to the super yacht industry. It's more, if you like, the sort of smaller pleasure boats that are owned perhaps by UK entities and that have been imported into the UK. If you have your VAT registration based somewhere in Europe, I mean, Malta is a common jurisdiction, as I'm sure you're aware. Brexit's not going to have an effect, or any meaningful one. It seems to me. I'm aware of, since that referendum, which, I mean, it seems like 20 years ago, doesn't it? But it was only 2016. Yeah. We have seen certain clients take sort of hedging action, if you like, in terms of their VAT and tax arrangements as they apply to their yachts. I mean, a classic play has been to, if you like, migrate your center of gravity, your place of business for VAT purposes from, for example, the Isle of Man, which, as I'm sure you know, for VAT purposes is part of the UK, to somewhere like Malta, which is, last time I checked, not scheduled to leave the EU anytime soon. So if you've taken that sort of action, you're not going to find yourself in any way materially impacted. I don't think. I mean, I suppose the worry might be, a more legitimate worry might be for a business like Pendennis or someone like that, like a UK-based, shipyard, super shipyard, that might find itself not able to offer, zero-rated VAT supplies for other yachts that are owned by, for example, a Maltese company, because we'll cease to be part of that common customs and VAT area. So that's a legitimate concern for me if I was the CEO of Pendennis. We'll have to see how that pans out. On the plus side of it, I mean, the first thing that occurred when the result was announced was that I think we discussed it before between ourselves, that with the UK out of the customs zone and treated for all purposes under the relevant treaty arrangements as a third country, you may now find that although London already is obviously a hub for ultra high net worth individuals across the world, that there's now an extra, if you like, benefit to being resident in the UK, because you could be so resident and then still import your yacht under the temporary admission regime into the EU, and not be liable to an import VAT charge immediately, because you'd be using the well-known TA rules and availing yourself of that relief. So I mean, that's you might say that's a minor positive, but I certainly view that as a positive for the UK.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think there are, as you said, I actually received a proposal for a submission from a law firm this morning, along the same lines as what you've just said. And I think people tend to entirely miss the point about this scenario. I think that the challenges for the UK, or the unknowns, are much more real for its rich and complex super yacht supply chain. The one man businesses that are that are producing all manner of systems, the OEMs and the distributors, and the impact that that may have, which is something we as an industry haven't discussed enough, I think. But I completely agree. I think from an ownership point of view, I think the sort of dramatic effect is probably slightly overhyped.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's it's the artisanal furniture makers, as you, for example, and the shipyards and the other superb craftsmen and engineers and so on that are employed all up and down the south coast. And it's up and down the south coast that I think have a more legitimate concern. I wish them well. I hope that there isn't. In practice, they don't experience any business interruption or downturn. But I mean, we wait and see, don't we? But things, as far as I can see, things don't look good for any deal being struck before the 31st of December. So it looks like very much like a hard crash out of the EU is on the cards. But who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? If this year taught us anything, it's that we don't know what's going to happen.
Well, indeed. I think looking perhaps at a less Anglo-centric perspective and a more Eurocentric perspective, you've written for us recently within the Super Yacht Buyer Report on the subject of taxation, and you took a very sort of Eurocentric purview of the situation. I wonder what do you anticipate as the evolution of the regulatory landscape in Europe and its application to yachts?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, I think I wrote something about this. Gosh, I should know whether it's 2019 or 2018. It was probably they all seem to blend into one, particularly after the year we've just had. But I think it was 2019 where I wrote something particularly about VAT as it applies. I mean, there's a whole host of other issues that fall within the or under the tax umbrella, we should say. But for VAT, I think the point I made in that article, if memory serves, is that whilst the idea behind the VAT regulations and treaty arrangements is that there is a single market and a single application, if you like, of the VAT rules, you and I and almost everyone that might be listening to this or indeed watching us knows that that's not true, knows that there are different member states that apply the rules in different ways. One might argue cynically to gain a market advantage over other member states, whether that's you're looking at be it leasing arrangements or other interpretations of the rules that that allow perhaps again, without wishing to impugn anyone or any member state, a particular member state to gain a commercial advantage in terms of being attractive to the owners of super yachts in terms of importing them and using them through their jurisdiction. And I don't personally see that changing at all, absent some really fundamental constitutional reforms in Europe. And I just don't think that the super yacht industry is far enough up the agenda for the EU Commission for that to change in the medium to long term at all. We've got the effects of a global pandemic to get through first.
Yes.
And going back to Brexit, we forget we're not the only party in this. We've got Europe. Goodness knows what's going on at Commission level and what they're thinking about in terms of what happens in the event of a hard Brexit. Those are the issues on everyone's mind. Reinventing the VAT wheel for the purposes of the super yacht market, I don't think is going to move the needle at all. So that's my answer on in terms of VAT. Did you have anything else within tax that you wanted to cover with that question?
I think, I guess, yeah, from both the regulator's point of view, but also looking at it, I guess, from the management of your assets and best practice due diligence. Do you believe that the time now, the paradigm that we exist in, is less geared towards sort of artificial tax reduction mechanisms, etc., and more to just following letter of the law, paying what taxes required, tax on charters? We've seen the arrangement with France and time spent in and out of waters. Do you feel that your clients of today are just keen to just pay and get on with it and feel comfortable that they are within the realms of the law?
Yeah. Well, I think my experiences for the last 2 or 3 years have shown me that certain member states, including France, are taking, perhaps you might say, a harder line in terms of enforcing the anti-abuse rules that are there. Again, going back to VAT, that are designed to stop people from taking liberties or abusing the rules, but perhaps complying with them on paper, but not in the spirit in which they were drafted or intended to be used and operated. But it's interesting. It's an interesting point you make, actually, because there was a bit of a sea change in terms of the rules and this, a sort of uptick in anti-abuse, anti-avoidance rhetoric and policy measures that goes back about 10 years. The famous Yacht 2000 letter that the Isle of Man authorities issued. So in fact, it might be more than 10 years old now. And for a long time, it didn't seem to have any effect. It's only over the last couple of years, I think, that I've personally seen certain customs authorities across Europe taking a harder line, perhaps not being correct. I mean, to be absolutely clear, I've not represented a client where I've thought that they have abused the rules, but I think there's more appetite from the competent authorities across the EU to start looking a little harder at ownership structures, and where they feel that there's a chance that someone is abusing the rules, that they'll go after them. And I think owners just have to be cognizant of that. And I think that the sort of closing argument I made in that piece I wrote for you in the Super Yacht Buyers Report was that there's nothing necessarily to be scared of with any of this. All you need to make sure you do is arm yourself with an appropriately qualified team of advisors and listen to them. And as long as you do that, I don't think there's anything to be afraid of.
I also think that there's, as you touched upon, there's been a change in discourse within the industry itself, within the CSP community, within the advisory network. I think there has been a change in ideology. I think the sort of quick fix brigade have largely become peripheral, and the industry is far more focused and far more aligned with best practice and due diligence, as I said.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's also, you see more and more owners that are concerned, not to be part of the next Paradise Papers leak or expose.
Yeah.
And that tends to be like a reformulation of that particular concern or question does tend to come up quite early in discussions with a potential new client. So yeah, no, I think that's a point well made. But you mentioned the CSP industry. That will always have a place. There's nothing wrong with the business that they do, provided it's the same as all of us, provided it's legitimate and lawful. There are very good reasons to use the structures offered by the CSP industry.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, and I think it's something that we try to promote with the buyer reports, is Just prudent asset management and seeking the best advice and the most legitimate advice. And I think that has sort of reinforced itself, certainly, as you say, in the last couple of years. And I think even more so in a bizarre way because of what's happening this year. And that it is a strange phenomenon, but maybe that's a positive that the industry will take forward in 2021 and beyond. I think sort of moving in a slightly nebulous way into a question that we've explored a number of times, and it's hard to sort of pinpoint an answer, but we talk a lot about perception of the industry as two, I'd say, relatively young blokes in the CPS industry. We sort of have quite strong opinions on how the industry is perceived and whether there are barriers to entry. Do you feel that the CPS industry is presenting itself in the best light to bolster the number of clients coming in?
You know, I just think that it's a question that the industry, perhaps I'm wrong, but my own perception is that it's a question the industry doesn't ask itself enough, if at all. And you know, that's not necessarily, that's not a slight on anyone. We all have, you know, businesses to run within the industry, and you know that takes time and effort. We can't spend all day ruminating on how best to ensure the industry, you know, is presented. But I think for me, the key driver to all of this is if the industry doesn't ensure that new entrants to it have a great experience, then they won't come back and they won't be part of the industry for any length of time. You know, the traditional model of an ultra high net worth individual buying let's say sub 24 meter yacht and then buying a larger one and staying in the industry for a number of years. That's what we should be aiming for. And I think what we do have to be cognizant of is when someone does enter the industry is making sure that they don't feel burned, essentially, that they get top line service from top level professionals across the board, from their brokers, their tax advisors, their lawyers, their CSP advisors that might be assisting them with their structuring, the whole 9 yards. I think that's really important, and that is something that we can all control and contribute to. When it comes to how the industry is perceived, I think that's something that, to a large extent, we can't really control. Because it's the mainstream media, for example, occasionally turns its beady eye to the super yacht industry, and I mean, you'll probably know more than I will. I mean, you can probably count on one hand the number of articles that you've seen over the years that have painted the industry in a favourable light. They tend to try and it just sells more newspapers, I suppose. That must be the reason. That must be the rationale for the line they take. So I think largely it's a question that it is out of our control. I think just taking the example of 2008, the last big financial crash that we all had to grapple with. I think at that time, the whole world was more cost conscious, and there was obviously austerity measures were being implemented across much of the Western world, and I think at that time there seemed to be a perception that it wasn't good for someone to flaunt one's wealth. At a time when they may be laying off people in their factories to then be seen on the back of a beautiful 70-meter Aberking or Rasmussen or whatever it is. So whether that again will be an issue that comes to the fore, because according to the last media reports I read on the subject, we're in for this is a 1 in 100 years historic recession that we're about to plunge into when furlough arrangements and so on cease to be in full force and effect and are wound down. So we'll have to see. I think I have a number of of friends in the family office sector that are very active in property, commercial property and residential property. And their view is that the UK hasn't really seen the teeth of this recession, but it will do. It will do when the furlough arrangements are wound down, and asset prices will take a huge knock. Property prices will take a big knock. Then we'll be in a different environment altogether, I would think. And perhaps the answer I've given you about, or the position I've taken on the state of the industry might be very different in 2021. You never know. Hopefully not. Hopefully, things continue on as they are. But I suppose one thing that we don't want is for it to be seen as less desirable or less acceptable politically or optically for a particular individual to be associated with the super yacht world or market.
Well, I guess that's quite a nice segue into my final question, which is fairly overarching, but it's the purpose really of bringing you, the experts from sectors across the industry, into this process to sort of discuss what the outlook is, because we, as you say, we're nowhere near through this pandemic, and that will have a negative, the way our laissez-faire industry with the laissez-faire economics, the trickle down effect, we will all feel the brunt in some way. But in terms of your outlook for beyond the pandemic, what are your expectations for the industry?
Well, I mean, one thing I would say about that is I think one effect of coronavirus, and this isn't a way of getting out of answering your question, Will, but one effect of coronavirus has made it, I think, certainly for us, and I would say for most businesses, it has made it more difficult to forecast. For more, for in advance, more than 2 or 3 months in advance, I would say, in some cases. But based on the activity that we've seen this year and how busy our practice has been this year, I'm cautiously optimistic that will continue into 2021. I mean, we have a number of clients that have been completely unaffected. You might say that they're being bullish while everyone else is being fearful and bearish in terms of they're aggressively using liquidity to buy up assets and so on and so forth, because of course they have the liquidity to do so. When markets return, they'll be in an even better, stronger position. So there are always winners and losers, aren't there? That you hear some stories of people of those in the hedge fund world and others that have actually done pretty decently out of the pandemic. So yes, basing 2021 and 2022, etc., on what we've seen in 2020, I'm positive. I think that the industry, you just have to work hard. God, I sound like my father now. Work hard and focus on what you do well. That's what we try and do at HC, and keep your clients happy. That's all you can really do. And I think that goes for my competitors across the other firms, the other law firms here in London, and the industry as a whole. It's none of us can turn the tide. We are there may be some stormy weather coming, but as long as you the industry just keeps going, is actually a bit of stoicism, and doesn't overextend itself, I think we'll be fine. I think we're to use that term acyclical again. I think we're lucky that the industry does seem to be acyclical, because the participants that drive the market do seem to be somewhat insulated from market shocks by virtue of the wealth and the financial means they have at their disposal.
Well, yeah, I completely agree, and I think on that good, strong moral message of work hard, we'll leave it there. But I hope next time, Adam, we'll be able to do this over a glass of wine and resume the series. But in the meantime, I really want to thank you for your time. It's been really enjoyable. Cheers.
My pleasure, Will. Thanks very much for having me.